Hey everyone, welcome back to All You Can Board. My name is Braden, this is Carlo, and today we're here with Own It, Play It, Skip It today. We're going to be covering 4 games today, trying out a little bit of a different format rather than the 6 usual games, maybe a little bit shorter, a little bit more concise. And of course, if you're new to the channel or haven't watched an Own It, Play It, Skip It, of course, this is suggestions, not for other people, but maybe something that we would give ourselves about this game. We of course are not telling you to own it, to play it, or to skip it. It is just a suggestion of maybe what we would give ourselves or future selves or past selves maybe in regards to what we think about these games, and maybe give you some inclination of where our tastes lie, of course.
Yeah.
Carlo, I'm interested to see what you're bringing to the table today.
All right. Don't pretend you don't know.
I do. I know already.
It's right here. You can see it now.
No, I've been hiding this entire time.
So the first game I'm going to be talking about today is Caper Europe. So this is I believe it's a 2022 release, yes. Designed by Unai Rubio, published by Keymaster, so they're the same company that did Parks. So they're known for like very nice quality production, really nice looking games kind of thing. They usually come in small boxes, fairly easy to learn. So originally this was, I believe, just Caper by this designer, came out a few years earlier, and then they sort of did this updated version, featured specifically in Europe. So thematically the game is you are, masterminds, and you're hiring thieves and acquiring gear with these thieves to, basically commit like a caper, stealing like stolen goods and, paintings, all kinds of things. The game comes with 4 different locations across Europe, so you can play either in, Rome, Barcelona, Paris, and London, I believe. So each one of those, comes into play in the setup, and there's different cards that you take from those decks to mix in with the main ones. The basic idea, it's a 2-player only game. And it's sort of a lane battling game. It has some similarities to games like, let's say, Battle Line or Airland and Sea or whatever, where you are basically playing cards in these different lanes. There's going to be 3 locations that you and the other player are fighting over, and so during the setup you're going to have pull from this deck, and there's going to be a different location in each of these 3 slots, and the location will have some type of end game scoring condition. For example, it'll say score X number of points for every stolen good that you have, or this many points for every thief that you have, or this many points for every color of, or this type of card or color of card that you have. And there's these little kind of, what is it called, like the caper tracker or whatever. There's this little indicator that shows that you're going to be, it's sort of a game of push and pull on each of these locations, where whichever player's side this token is on at the end of the game is going to earn the right to score the points for the location. You're also going to be scoring end-game points for your thief cards based on certain conditions that will come into play. You can score points for your gear cards. I think there's points as well for your leftover coins. So the basic idea is it has drafting, set collection, a bunch of different things going on. It plays over 6 rounds, and they're basically alternating rounds there's like thief rounds and then gear rounds. So throughout the game, you're going to end up, by the end of the game, having played 6 thieves in total. Each of these locations has 3 open slots. So there's a total of 9 slots, basically 9 rows, and each time you basically start with you deal out thief cards, you draft one, pass the rest to the other player, then you draft one again, pass the rest, and progressively throughout the game, in the first round, you're going to play 3 thieves. You can play them in the same location. Technically, you can play all 3 in the same location, but again, they're in different rows, or you can play one and spread them across different locations. It's up to you where you play these thieves. And then in the next thief round, which will be round 3, you're going to end up playing only 2 thieves, and then in the 5th round, which is the last thief round, you'll only play 1 thief. So you're committing half of your thieves basically in the first round of the game, and then throughout you have a little less wiggle room in terms of where you're going to be kind of fighting over things. And each thief card can then acquire up to 3 gear cards, which you can stack on the thieves, which will then, manipulate. Sometimes they'll push or pull that kind of tracker closer to you or your opponent, or you can, basically trying to swing these in your favor. So that's kind of, I guess, like an overview of how the game plays. I'm going to say right now, this game was, I had high expectations for it based on some of the other kind of early buzz it got, some of the reviews. The production looked really, really nice. And, just for the price point and stuff, it seemed like you were getting a lot in the box. And I did enjoy my plays of it enough, I would say, but I'll say right now, this is a play it for me. I was expecting it to be closer to an own it when I first got it, and I had kind of like skimmed through the rules, and again, some of the buzz I'd really heard about this game had me very hopeful, and I thought that this might be something that was going to stay in my collection for a long time. But I've played it now probably about 7 or 8 times. It's on Board Game Arena in case you want to try it for free. I've tried it on there quite a bit. I've tried it in person quite a bit as well. And ultimately, I end up thinking it's actually closer to a skip than an own. It is something that I still am very glad that I've played, and that I would encourage other people to give a shot if it sounds interesting. But there's a couple things that I want to hear what you think of it first, because I know you've played this as well a bit,
sure.
right? Didn't you do pretty well in the AYCB Caper tournament?
I don't remember how well I did. I will post exactly how well I did here. And of course, the AYCB tournament, shameless plug for our Discord,
yes,
of course. We
absolutely.
host tournaments every so often, usually every month, by Ted. Shout out to Ted.
Yes, thank you, Ted.
Yes, but for Caper Europe, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting, but I kind of feel very similar to how you felt as well. After playing it a few times, I think that you kind of see a lot of what the game has to offer.
Yep.
And game to game, I mean, depending on which locations are out and where, London or Paris or whatever, that does change some of the dynamics and the cards that you're getting, obviously. But it didn't feel like there was a massive change, but it was fun. And I mean, the box is hella cute too. So
yeah. And again, even just the and it does play pretty quickly. The setup for this type of game is a little longer than I'd like, just because once you pick a city, you have to pull out the thief cards for that city, the location cards, the gear cards or whatever, and then you're mixing them all in. And then if you want to play again and pick a different city, you have to sort of unsort all the cards and then pull a new deck and kind of sort them and shuffle them all again. So it's not quite as snappy as again, these other similar kind of lane battling games. And so I want to highlight a couple of things that I liked first, and I'll talk about what kind of made the game not quite, I wouldn't say fall apart, because I don't want to sound overly harsh, and again, I did enjoy playing it enough, but so I like the aspect. My favorite aspect is probably the thieves and how you commit, again, right from the start. You kind of have to show your hand to your opponent in the sense that if I play 2 thieves to this location right in the first round, now I'm going to probably be acquiring a bunch of gear cards to play there, and I'm going to be fighting over that location a lot. Yeah. So you can potentially bluff by playing 1 thief there to make me think you're gonna fight me over it, and then you might end up playing your thieves elsewhere and playing other cards, and I might overcommit somewhere, or just trying to see as the game goes on, and I see that you are playing a bunch of cards to one location and pulling that tracker towards you, I might think, oh, he's going to get a lot of points. Now in the next thief round, I have to actually play a couple thieves there. But you also never know which thieves are going to come up and which you're going to see. So I like that you're having to kind of adjust in that sense. The main things I didn't like about it were, the thief aspect is great. The gear cards is where it sort of started to fall apart a bit for me. First off, thematically, the drafting didn't make sense for the gear cards. For thieves, it makes sense, okay? You're a mastermind, you're trying to hire thieves for this caper. So you get a hand, these thieves basically come looking for work.
Right.
You hire one of them, you don't hire the others, they go looking for work elsewhere. Okay, fine, we'll go see if someone else wants to hire us, kind of thing, right? So they go back and forth. That aspect of the drafting makes sense thematically. But with the gear cards, why are you drafting them back and forth? You take a card and then you pass all the gear to the other, what does that represent?
Could it be like an arms race? Could it be a representation of an arms race? You know what I mean? Someone's grabbing something else, and then you didn't get to that fast enough.
Maybe, but then why are we switching? It feels like we're running across back and forth to different tables or something. To me, thematically, my bigger problem with it is mechanically. I just want to start with the thematic aspect. Okay, just to be clear,
it sounds like it's all thematic.
I've talked about before. There's certain things about certain games where it's the same thing as we talked about Feast Road, and why is the silver on the banquet table? And Dylan's well, they used the silver to go to the market and buy it. I'm well, then why is it served on the banquet table? Why didn't they give you the silver at the entrance, right? So. But mechanically, it also is a little unsatisfying, because I think the game would be more interesting if you got your hand of gear cards, and because you get more gear cards than thief cards, you start with, I think, 6 gear cards. To me, it would be so much more interesting and less of a game of memory and card counting if you didn't know what your opponent was holding, because as soon as you each play a card and you pass them, you know what you've handed off to your opponent, and then when you get their cards back, now you know the rest of the cards that are in the pool for the rest of that round. So now it's just okay, well, because I passed that card, and I know that I need purple cards because I have this thief that's going to score for purple cards, but okay, so I'm going to be able to get this many cards. It ends up being this kind of calculation that comes into play,
Yeah.
and a game of memory, which like even though I think memory is one of my strong suits, like I don't like it when a game is basically rewarding someone for having like a better memory than someone else. Like to me, that's not really the most satisfying thing. And I think of a game like Air, Land, and Sea and how intriguing it is when you get your hand of cards and you don't know what the other person is holding and you're trying to figure out when to play or trying to anticipate like what's going to happen here. And I feel like that kind of that intrigue, that mystery is kind of lost by the drafting. So I wish it was that you drafted the thief cards. I like that, but I wish once you dealt the gear cards that you just had your hand of gear cards, and I think the rounds would play out a lot more interesting that way. And part of the reason I mentioned the calculating and the card counting too is because by the end of the game, you go through all of the gear cards. And so you know, for example, like when I was playing the first time with someone, we looked and we saw the red ones, what are they called? The burn cards or whatever. Yeah. You know that there's 4 of them. I mean, maybe with one of the cities there might be more than the game. So as the game is playing out and you know how many have been played, you can just keep track like, well, I know I'm safe to play this because all 4 burn cards have already entered the play. I wish the deck was bigger and maybe you only went through like 50% or 75% of the cards so that there's a bit of that unknown. Usually games have that where it's like discard a certain amount of cards off the deck or remove this many tiles so you can't just count everything or make that calculation. So yeah, that's I would say where the game kind of, again, didn't quite fall apart. And then just generally in drafting games, I find the longer it goes on and you've stated your kind of point conditions, it becomes obvious like, well, if I'm getting points like for every set of purple and green cards, obviously I need more purple and green. Like it just becomes a little less, the decisions become a little less interesting the later the game goes on, I find. So I think it's still good and I'm glad I got to play it the amount of times I did, but I don't think it has like enough depth that it's going to be something that I want to revisit over and over again, especially ahead of other similar 2-player kind of lane battling style games.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I think I actually disagree with you about the drafting for the equipment cards. I think because I think what makes it interesting is because if you get cards and then you pass them off and you have this hand and you're looking at it and you're going, oh man, like I need to take this card because he's scoring for all money cards for this round. It's like, okay, but I really don't want this one because there's no money in the pool or something like that, right? Like
that's true. Like that's the whole drafting aspect of like the hate drafting almost, like weighing like, do I keep this one for myself or do I take this because my opponent needs it?
The value. But I totally see where you're coming from. Like once you see those cards, you know what's in the pool, and then you already know, oh, okay, well, I don't have to worry about this, or like you can discount things a lot more often. Yeah. And it also probably helps a little bit with luck, I would say as well, right? Like
definitely.
You just get your cards and you're like, well, I didn't get any purples this round, so blah, blah, blah. Like
that's true.
That way then
it balances it out
goes
a bit.
Back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, so I think the criticisms I have are not like inherent design flaws.
No.
I want to stress that like it's just a matter of personal preference.
For sure.
So it's just what I prefer in a game.
Yep.
So
I think it was fun. Like I'm also glad that I played it too. I could see playing this with a younger crowd.
Yeah.
And they would probably really enjoy it. Again, the design is really, really nice. The artwork is awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there wasn't a ton of staying power for it for me as well. So
yeah, fair enough. So yeah, that is Caper Europe. Again, it's a very short game, easy to learn. Even if you only have it on the shelf and play it like a couple times a year, you're not gonna have to like do a big refresh on the rules or whatnot. So if it sounds interesting at all to you, again, check it out for free on Board Game Arena. The implementation works very well on there. But yeah, that is a play it from me.
Superb. Okay, my first game for today is going to be Final Girl. From Van Ryder Games. Oh, and I don't know if I can stand that up properly. Yes, okay, that's good. And this is the Into the Void. This is from Season 2 of the Kickstarter. I just recently got it, probably about, I want to say a month ago, but it's probably been like 2 or 3. Because time is weird like that. But this is from Season 2. I backed it on Kickstarter and got all the other little bits with it as well. So Final Go, if you don't know, this is inherently a solo game, solo only game that you play. It's modular where you can get different scenarios. I only have the one here with me, and this is basically like an Alien theme, Alien the movie themed board game, where you are the final girl trying to slay the enemy, whether it is the alien in this case or Jack the Ripper, not actually Jack the Ripper, but some kind of horror movie equivalent let's say.
And they don't use any real IPs for these.
That's
right?
correct. That's correct. Yeah, they don't actually officially tie in, but
Right,
they
right.
definitely have
Completely
some
borderline, yeah.
parallels
Fair
for
enough, yeah,
sure.
yeah.
So this is the alien theme one. You go around the ship. You can activate different things on it. You can crawl through vents in certain ways. There are key cards. There's a cat token that comes up at some point. Like
Big fan.
there's different scenarios depending on how the game is all set up. So you have a hand of cards. You're playing a certain amount of cards, and your cards cost you time. And then you have to you make rolls based on what cards you play. You either get successes, semi-successes, or outright failures, and that affects your game state from how you go on forward from there. This was interesting for me. I wasn't exactly sure how I would feel about it. I think it's made by the same people who made Hostage Negotiator. I'm pretty certain about that. And I was interested in the solo game, especially. I think I backed this probably during the pandemic because I was like, "Oh man, like
This thing's never ending.
yeah, good, yeah, we're never gonna get out of it, and we still aren't." No, but this was interesting. I enjoyed it. For me, it's going to be definitely a play. Not quite an own. I will say the first game that I had of this, I did not like it. It was a skip for me at my first
Yeah, I was
play.
gonna say I'm surprised to hear play based on what you told me initially. Yeah.
Yeah, I got absolutely destroyed. Capital D-destroyed. Like, run over. Like, to the point where I was like, I don't want to play this game anymore. Like, it was just...
Do you
it
lose
was
early? I noticed the box like 20 to 60
Yes.
minutes is like when you say absolutely destroyed. Like, did you lose in like 15, 20 minutes kind of thing?
I
or-
lost fast,
Okay,
yes.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
things just kind of spiraled out of control, and I think that can happen.
Okay.
That's totally fine. Now, it was probably a combination of things, me not knowing exactly how to play,
Right.
getting some bad luck for sure. My second playthrough was literally the exact opposite. I had amazing luck. I absolutely crushed it. I got like a big mech suit that I had like a whole thing for, and
That sounds cool.
And won via that, which is great because this game has, for it being solo, it isn't just like you beat the game, great job, thumbs up. It's more of like, okay, you beat the game, but here are a few other scenarios that you should try to beat it as.
Oh,
Like,
cool. I
So
was
beat
gonna
it,
ask about
beat
that,
it in a mech suit, beat it, by opening the vents and venting the alien out like that. You need to have certain conditions to do those things, and certain like key amount of key cards in this scenario. And I'm sure that it's obviously different for the different games, or the different scenarios, I should say. But this particular scenario was interesting, and it comes with a couple different final girls, which you have like your own unique power as well. So there are, I don't think they're called victims, maybe not hostages, or bystanders that are on the map. So every time you rescue a bystander, you put it onto like your card, and it covers a certain thing, which allows you to get like a power. And then once you've covered your card entirely, you can flip it over and you get like a permanent bonus power for the entire game. So there's extra incentive to work towards it rather than just going after the villain in some cases. But yeah, it was interesting. Like this particular box, the alien has an interesting aspect to it where it kind of evolves. It's called an evomorph. Again, parallels. But where it kind of changes, so you would want to attack it maybe early on, but it's also like super deadly. But then when it evolves, like, and it hides like the alien, like it does a really good job of like matching those thematics. I think we'll see if it will stay in my collection. I think
Right.
the biggest positives for me for sure were. The components were really nice. The dice were fun to roll. I think that should be that's important actually for me.
Yeah, especially if you're playing solo, you have to feel like you're enjoying the activity, right?
For sure, absolutely. The puzzle of like the cards and everything, and like which way you should go, and the decisions being made there, I think were really good. Which I think is the core to the gameplay. And like, yes, there is going to be some luck involved with like what cards come out, what events you're drawing events after every round, kind of thing. What happens there, how that changes the game. Maybe you have to go rescue the captain now, or whatever happens. And so that changes things as well. And there's a lot of good variance, I would say, to this game, just for the one box too.
Okay. That's impressive. I was actually going to ask about that. Because a lot of solo games have that issue of like once you beat it once, do you have the incentive to go back?
Yeah.
Whether it's saying like, oh, here's a harder mode or a different target, but the fact that you have different scenarios, I had no idea. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, there's like little different scenarios that start up from there, and they can happen mid-game kind of thing that changes things. Like I had the captain just all of a sudden show up,
Right.
and like it gives you, there's like a detriment if the captain dies, so they're like a special colored bystander. Like there's a thing called bloodlust, where if like it gets to a certain point, I don't know if the game ends, but they do like the game. Basically, the villain gains more damage the more bystanders they kill, kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And more bad things start to happen, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So I have a couple questions for you,
Yeah.
actually. One is just because this comes to play a lot with solo games. How easy was it managing like the enemy, like the evomorph or whatever? Like when we talk about solo games, there's like sometimes a lot of like, oh, we have to spend so much time managing the bot. Like how much of it was like you playing and making decisions for yourself versus like managing the game state?
I would say it's probably like 80% you making your decisions and maybe like 20% managing the
Which
bot.
is totally acceptable for a solo game, I think.
It's very easy. Like
Yeah,
it's very simple actions. It's usually like it tells you like who the enemy is targeting, move. It'll give you like a move icon, so they're going to move a certain amount of spaces, which is labeled out for you, and then it'll say attack. So if they're in the room, they attack. If sometimes their attack leads to nowhere, whatever it is. So they'll say exactly what needs to happen, and then you manage some of the bystanders. So like say if one of the bystanders gets killed in the room and there's like two others there, they'll end up fleeing. So you roll, and whatever number you roll, depending on where they will run into different rooms.
Okay.
And it's all marked on the map. It's very clear.
Sounds pretty straightforward, though.
It is very
So there wasn't a
straightforward.
lot of like sitting there with the rule book open,
No.
following along, like reading it through a chart or something. Like,
No, I will say definitely my first play was that.
Yeah,
was
but
like,
first play, that's to
it
be
is.
expected kind of thing. Yeah.
It is. It was a lot to set up. I will say that's probably one of my downish sides. Is like there's like 3 like little item decks you need to set up. There's a whole event deck. There's the deck for the villain, as well as I think there's one other deck. There was like an evolution deck for this particular case as well, which again is fine. It leads to that variance. It's going to give you the replayability, which I think is good. It just felt like a lot to bring out to then play. Now to leave it, what I did was I left it set up after that. That was great.
Nice.
That was fantastic. The other thing I will say too, and it's just because of the inherent nature that it is. Like they have scenario boxes and they have a core box. So the common components that are for everyone, putting them together, like I don't feel like I have enough room in just those 2 boxes to store everything that I need for the game. I think that there is extra components, and maybe that's just because of the Kickstarter and stuff like this. But I would love, my ideal, because I've only backed one scenario, would be to have just this box, or even just the 2 boxes or whatever.
Right.
And there's just slightly too many things, I think, there, and they don't quite, like, I don't know actually where everything should go from the box, which is, I don't know. That's just a me thing, I think, though. But
sorry.
Yes, no, please go.
Last question for you is just in terms of like the horror theme. Like I don't know how into horror movies you are and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Did that translate? Like, did you feel that sense of like, oh, I'm being hunted, or like, not say you're gonna be scared, obviously, but like, does that horror theme come through, or do you feel like this could have been kind of had a non-horror theme and have like succeeded just as well?
No, I think it's good. I think it does come through. Like I was definitely terrified sometimes of like.
Dim the lights, put on some thematic music.
Honestly, yeah, if you did that, it would be even better.
Yeah.
But like the alien would disappear, and you're just like, well, I hope to God it doesn't show up here, because then I'm going to be absolutely screwed. Or it's like I'm going to try and plan for it to here. Like it depends on what your game state is for sure. But I think it definitely comes through. Like it removing some of the bystanders from the game. It gives you that feel of like you're being hunted down by this alien in this case too. So
cool.
Yeah, definitely a play for me. Worth checking out. I think if you're looking for a solo game, it's not going to be one that's going to be very quick to set up, but it's one that if you're able to leave out on a gaming table or wherever you play and come back to it 2-3 times, I think is going to be worth setting up and resetting easy, and gives you a really good, definitely a good variety, even just between the 2 plays that I had with it. Like I can easily seeing it being, very different, even if you get some of the similar cards.
Right.
Like it's going to be a very different game for how it sets up and what events come out at that same time too. So,
Nice.
Yeah, that's
Cool.
Final Girl Into the Void.
Sounds good. Yeah, I might end up asking to borrow that one from you at some
100%.
point in the future. I didn't think I'd be interested, but you piqued my interest a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll see. Once I get through my own massive shelf of unplayed games,
Yeah.
then if you still have it in your collection, maybe.
Oh,
at
it'll
that
be
point.
around.
Okay. All right. Then the second and I guess final game I'm talking about today here is the Guild of Merchant Explorers. So this is another 2022 release. This is it's co-designed, right? Matthew Dunstan and Brett J. Gilberts. Published by AEG. This plays 1 to 4 players, takes about half an hour to 45 minutes. Very simple rules, like I would say simpler than Caper Europe, which I just spoke of. Don't let the size of the box fool you. AEG did this with at least one other game, Santa Monica, where like there's so much space and like the insert just takes up so much of the box that it felt like it could have been in a smaller box. So I don't know if this is this happens with other AEG games. Maybe I haven't really noticed it, but this definitely feels like it's sort of like a roll and write game the way you play it, but it's played with like cubes being placed on these maps, and there's a reason why it's in this bigger box. But it feels like a game that could have also worked just like pen and paper sort of thing. But the production is nice. Some people I know were a little turned off. Some people didn't really like the art style or the kind of color palette. I actually like it, especially for this kind of like old map kind of like discovery kind of theme. Like the setting, I think the art style and the colors and everything work specifically in this kind of, again, in this setting. So what you're doing is you basically take out one of these maps. There are 4 of them total in this box. You take out a map, you shuffle up these cards, the game plays over 4 rounds, and it's kind of has some similarities to Kingdom Builder, where you shuffle up these cards. There's I think 5 or 6 at the start, and they're just basic cards where you flip one off the top of the deck and place it on the board, and that's going to tell you where you can place your cubes, which are, I think they're called like settlements or whatnot. You start off, there's like a middle spot on the map where you have to start building out from, and it's touching all the different kinds of land. There's I think 3 different types of land. There's like forest, mountain, desert, and then there's also water. And so like one card that you flip might say place, 1 piece on a mountain space, or place, 2 pieces on forest, or place 3 on the water, but they have to be in a straight line. Or then there's another one that just says place 2 directly next to each other on any type of land. And so you're basically flipping these over. Again, the order is always going to be random, and you're building out and placing these little settlements. Each of the areas, like each of the regions, let's say you have like a desert that has, let's say, 3 or 4 spaces. Once you have covered every space in a region, you then remove one of your settlements and you place one of these villages out. And it's like a bigger kind of, it looks like a little hut, like a house kind of thing on the map. At the end of the round, you're going to remove everything on your map except your villages. And then in the second round, you're only going to be able to start from, again, your center spot, or you can start from any villages. But it's tough, like you're only getting, you're getting more and more turns and more abilities and stuff, which I'll get to in a second, each subsequent round as the game goes on. So as the game goes on, it has this really nice arc where you're able to do more. But at the start, like especially the first couple times you play and you like realize how many cubes you're wiping off, and you might have like 1 or 2 villages, you're like, man, this feels really restrictive. Like I'm kind of, round 2 sometimes feel like you're starting over again. Like you've removed almost all of your progress. And you don't get that many points for them either. Like you get more points as the game goes on, all kinds of different ways. There's these discovery towers. There's 4 of them. Usually they're split out into like the corners of the map. So you can't really get to all of them, but for each one you get like more it's like 6 points if you get to one, then the next one gives you 8 or 10 or something like that, and then up to I think 12 or 14 max. So you're incentivized to kind of specialize in a way, but there's certain things that will sometimes encourage you to diversify as well. But you really have to come up with a plan in this game. Like even though you have to make these tactical adjustments because you might think, hey, I want to get to this corner of the map, but if the cards don't come up in a certain order, you might not be able to chain enough actions together to actually get to your destination. Or you might get really close to it, but then the round ends and you have to wipe everything because you didn't quite get enough settlements to build that little village. So, and there's these goal cards that you set out at the beginning of the game. They'll say, you have to build like 3 villages on desert, or you have to reach 3 discovery towers, or you have to unlock these. There's also these treasure spaces that you can cover up where you draw a treasure card from the deck, which they can do a number of different things. But one of the most interesting things about the game that I haven't got to, which I said, was as you go through each round, you're going to be drawing one of these. I can't remember what they're called right now. They're basically like these ability cards, and they're going to be basically a super powered version of these cards where I'm telling you you get to build somewhere. So you're going to draw 2 of them from the deck, and you're going to have to pick one. You're going to have to take that ability right away, and then it goes into the deck for the rest of the game. So for the rest of the game now. Every round subsequently, you're going to be drawing this new card at some point that's going to say maybe like you can build on like maybe 6 spaces total, maybe build on like 4 desert and 2 mountain, but you never know when that's going to come up, but you really have to be like anticipating that and kind of keeping your options open based on that. And then in round, let's say 3, you're drawing again the card that you got in round 1 and round 2, and now you're going to draw a new one for round 3. And then in the 4th and final round, there's a card that comes up that basically tells you pick your round 1, 2, or 3 card to kind of use that ability again. So you're kind of, it's almost like a little bit of a deck building thing where you're adding these cards to your deck and then choosing at the end like how to make use of all these cards in the best way possible. It's a really interesting game and was such a surprise for me. Like I did not expect to enjoy this as much as I did. I will say the main flaw I have with the game is the fact that, again, like for the size of box, and I'll just say right now, like it's pretty much multiplayer solitaire. Like if you're playing this more than solo, whether it's 2 to 4, the only interaction you have is basically for the goal cards that get set out. You don't have to achieve the goals, but it's like the first player to meet this goal gets 10 points, the next players get 5, or if you don't complete them, you get 0. So it's literally just a race. You know, you might keep an eye on your opponent's map to see, oh, they're gonna get that goal and I'm close too. Maybe I should make a push for that to get the 10 points. That is it. Otherwise, you can just look at your map the whole game, don't even care about what your opponent is doing. So I've definitely enjoyed playing this most, like by far I've like loved this as a solo game. It to me succeeds most as a solo game, but at the same time, because of the kind of setup and the fiddliness of you're collecting so many of these little point tokens throughout the game, these coins that represent your points, and your scores are going to usually end up somewhere over 100, and so you're like, sometimes you do think, oh, I take a coin, oh, I take a coin, and then there's all different conversions. Oh, I'll trade this 5 or these 5 ones in to take a 5 coin, and there's a lot of like maintenance throughout the game. I feel like if this was an app, like a digital version, a Steam version, if it was on Board Game Arena or something like that, I feel like I would get addicted and play this thing all the time. And the other thing is, I feel like I wish there was a couple more maps, because there's 4 in the base game. The first 2 kind of in terms of complexity, the first 2 are somewhat similar. Like there isn't a whole lot, like obviously the geography, the way things are laid out is different enough, but they don't feel like you're playing like an inherently different game. The 3rd map introduces something a little bit different, and the 4th map does as well. So this is a play it, but a very strong, like, well, the first time I played this, I thought it was going to be an own it for me. I was like, this is one of the best games of the year, I thought right away. And then again, as playing solo, and then as I played it more, what has kept me continuing playing it is because it's still really tough. And the solo mode, you actually have to complete the goals. If you haven't achieved all 3 of the goals, it doesn't matter what your score is at the game, you lose straight up if you haven't completed all 3 of the goals. So I like that aspect too of the solo game, that it forces you to play to this while working against the restrictions of what cards you're getting. So it feels like it's more challenging. And again, like I don't really care what the other player or players are doing when I'm playing with more people. So yeah, it's weird because for the price point, like I don't need all these extra components for other players. I might play this as a 2-player game, but I'm never gonna want to play this with 3 or 4 really.
Yeah.
So I think that and the fact that I wish there was a couple more maps, or if there was like, and if I knew there was an expansion coming with like 4 more maps, I might say this is an own it, because if it was like just a relatively inexpensive expansion, I would definitely buy it, put it in here, and I would keep this game around for a while. And it's very challenging. Like I have not been able to achieve the hard mode on any of the maps yet. After almost like 10 plays, I've gotten the kind of like normal target a couple times, but it's a really tough game to do well at. So there's a lot to like here. I know you've been interested in this. You didn't have a chance to play it yet, right? Like, are you more or less interested now hearing me talk about this?
Definitely more. I totally forgot about the powers thing that you were talking about like going back into your deck after you first get it. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I also want to say, like this is one of those games like where it could have easily been like one of those beige kind of, and it is similar,
sort of,
but it has like little pops of color to it, which I got to give props for sure as well.
And it's like if you look in those old map books, like those old lost maps, like that, it looks like those. That's what I meant, where it's like it fits, right?
Totally. I do have one question actually for you. So, because it does feel very multiplayer solitaire. Is that what I said? Is that what you said? Multiplayer solitaire.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like if either like one of the cards or some of the cards had, let's say they got added to the deck when you played multiplayer, that were like, add a cube or like a boulder or something that blocks your opponent on this space or something. If you block, like would that kind of interaction, kind of like similar to what's the roll and write game? Cartographers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I thought I was actually thinking of Cartographers before you mentioned that, because I was going to say that's the one thing I didn't really like about. Like, I realize that is Cartographers and what it is, but I feel like when I'm playing that type of game where I'm just like, I have a map, I'm building something out, like especially when it's like, again, like a roll and write, or this one's kind of like a draw in place, I guess, draw a card and place things on a map. Like, I don't, especially because we're playing on different maps, I don't want to be placing things on other players' maps and having to look across and pay that close attention. True. If it was on a shared map, like, it would be, and obviously the game wouldn't really work that way, like, just the inherent nature of it just wouldn't work that way. So, like, I think it makes sense that it doesn't have, but I almost wish they had just branded it as like a 2-player game, fewer components, made in a smaller box, like lower price point. Like, it's like, I think $50 Canadian or so. And like, if this was a solo only or whatever, and it was like a $25 game, and like maybe the components just went towards like more maps instead of having all these cubes in other colors that I don't need and stuff. Like, it just sits in a bit of a weird spot, but what impresses me so much is that aspect of the eras, and how at the end of the round you basically wipe your whole board other than those villages. To me, that's brilliant, and adding in the abilities, those two things combined, it does enough to similar to other games, but with those new twists that really make me want to come back and play this a bunch more. So
this is almost very similar to like Blue Lagoon. It's almost like solo Blue Lagoon.
That definitely, it has the similarities to Blue Lagoon and Kingdom Builder in that sense.
Yeah,
it's like you draw the card and go where to place, but the reset is Blue Lagoon style.
That's right, where you leave it on there, and like Blue Lagoon is like the multiplayer version with right, where you have and you're blocking and stuff like that too. But an entirely different game when it comes to it too. So,
but that goes back to your other question. Is like in Blue Lagoon it works because you're on a shared map, so I want to get in people's way or do those things. But in here on my own map, like it's just a hard sell to be like really interfering with someone else's map.
And I think you're right too. If you have two different maps, I think that's probably going to be too much to look at, and never mind 3 or 4 player, right? That's just going to be too many things. So that's
and it would also affect the playtime of the game. And like, this 100%. Isn't the type of game that I want to go like over an hour, but solo you can play this in like half an hour, easy, and it's set up quick. The rules are like a few pages, like it's very easy to learn. So even if you buy this and it sits on your shelf for like 6 months at a time, it'll be easy to take off again and just play once in a while. So I know once, if there is an expansion that comes out and I get those maps or whatever, like I might end up looking back on this and thinking, that's definitely an own it. Like it's a really, really good game. It's very well designed, and if you're at all into these kind of games and you're okay with the multiplayer solitaire, I absolutely urge you to check this out.
Yeah,
but it's best solo.
I'm definitely gonna steal this from you for sure.
Yeah, borrow it as long as you want. Great game.
Very exciting.
Guild of Merchant Explorers, and always interested in what these designers are doing.
Nice. Okay. Oh man, I might get you to try and pronounce this guy's last name. But maybe
there's plenty of soccer players with that last name.
I'll
let you try it.
Fabulous. Okay, cool. The final game for today is going to be Paper Dungeons by Alley Cat Games, designed by Leandro Pieres.
Pieres.
Hey, let's go. So this is a game for 1 to 8 players. It says it plays in about 30 minutes. I'd say it's probably actually pretty accurate, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how long you take. But this is a roll and write game based around basically a dungeon theme. Surprise, there's a dragon on the front.
And it has dungeons in the name.
That's exactly right, yeah. Paper and dungeons. Basically in this game, you are representing I would say gathering party, a traveling party, basically D&D style, where you have multiple. You've got like a wizard, a cleric, a rogue, and another character that I can't remember off the top of my head. What is it? Wizard, cleric? Oh, soldier, of course, or like a fighter with a sword. Okay. And you are traversing through this dungeon map. So you're going through and fighting monsters in certain ways. So. And leveling up as you do. So as you roll, you're choosing to cross off a certain parts of the upgrades on your map that you're giving, and then you're also using dice for movement on the map. So you're kind of balancing how much you want to upgrade your party, which will give you more strength, which you'll need to go through deeper into the dungeon. But you'll also need to make sure that you are doing it in a timely manner, because you only have a certain amount of rounds to get to certain spots on the map. So how it works is you're given objective cards. It's actually very similar to Guild of Merchant Explorers, where you have in multiplayer, like you have to get to certain spaces before others do and claim different rewards. But basically, you're given these objectives. And I will say I played this primarily only solo. I think I played 2 or 3 times of it. I've really enjoyed it. It is a play for me, I will say right now. The dice feel is incredible, I gotta say.
Oh, yeah?
That's one thing about this game. Definitely, like, I don't know why.
I never heard you say
I know.
really praise the dice this much.
It's great. I know I'm a big dice guy. If you guys have seen the top board game components, we talk about the best dice. These rival Disney Monopoly dice.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know. I regret not putting them on the list. No.
Okay.
They are really good though. They've got a good sound. Maybe I'll record some like ASMR and put it here for it, because like they are good. It's good. So where was I? Okay, components. You've got your objectives that you have to complete, but you also have like these 3 bosses that are kind of throughout the map, and all you have to do is just go through the bosses, and then at a certain time, say like after the 3rd round or something, you'll total up your total strength, and you will fight the first boss if you've crossed through their room by that time. Okay? And you'll do that kind of throughout the game.
One quick question, sorry, just because I don't know if the people at home want the same thing.
No.
Are you encountering the boss at the same time as the other players?
Correct.
Because you're each playing your own sheet, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So it all happens at like after the 3rd round. So if you've already crossed through the room that they're in, then you don't deal with them there. You deal with them at that time, and everyone deals with them at the same time.
All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
Nope. That's a great question. And then as you go, you're either fighting different. You're going over different traps and stuff, and you each have like your own unique party, basically. Like you have certain upgrades that, like, let's say you get a certain amount of points. Like if you go through 7 traps or 8 traps, you'll get 9 points or something. And another person will have their own thing that'll be like brew 10 health potions or something, and you'll get 8 or 9 points or something. But that'll also give you a different setup of like, it'll give you, you're going to use 3 on the white wizard column. You're going to start with certain levels. So there's a little bit of variability where you're not just always with the same setup regardless where you go. You get to choose from goal cards. So there's a variety of different ways that you can score points in this game. There's different upgrades that you can choose depending on which dice you roll. So there's black and white dice. They have different symbols on them, but so there are some common symbols. But again, you're just using those to either upgrade your party or to take different actions, basically. So. And I thought it was interesting kind of throughout. Like the one thing I will say is like even after 3 plays, I felt like I had already kind of seen what the game was. Like the one thing I will say is like the map doesn't change no matter what. Like it does technically change because the setup, they'll get you to add walls to certain spaces, but generally like what's on the map, all the traps and everything are always going to be in the same spot. So There is some variability of like which strategy you're choosing and like where you're entering the dungeon and stuff like this, but there isn't too much beyond that, I think.
Okay.
So
I didn't realize it was just one map. So, and are these sheets of paper or are they dry erase?
Sheets of paper. There are a lot of sheets of paper.
Right.
Great
and it
pencils.
goes up to eight players, of course. So
yeah, and this would be again very multiplayer.
And they're not even
solitaire.
double sided, or I guess they might be double sided, but still the same
Single sided. Same map.
Okay.
Same map throughout the entire thing. And they do have like a campaign, very loosely campaign, but nothing changes. No, nothing. It's just like story things. It's basically this party went to this place, and now you're here. And
you don't like carry over abilities and start the next one. That's a shame.
I know. Yeah, that's what I think it could use a little bit. Like I felt like, by playing a few games of this, I there wasn't any like necessarily mystery. It was just kind of. It was going through the motions a little bit. I mean, again, rolling the dice. Let me tell you,
those dice.
It's good.
Just take the dice out, get rid of the rest of the. No, I'm just
honestly, yeah. I do wish all games had these dice.
Okay.
I will say that right now.
I have to open this up as soon as we're done.
Yeah, it's great. It's good. I had like a rolling tray. Anyway,
Okay.
every time I mention the dice, it's just the rolling, the rolling.
Right.
sound.
Yeah. Okay. Have you played
yeah.
Dungeons, Dice, and Danger?
No,
yet?
I haven't.
Okay.
And I talked to Dylan about that too.
Okay.
And because he'd also played Paper Dungeons and said that he liked. Well, I won't. I don't know if I will reveal his opinion on this.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I haven't played it, but I have heard similarities.
Okay. Yeah, and they're like it's interesting to me because these are both, I think, came out in the same year, and they're both kind of roll and write games about exploring a dungeon.
Yeah.
And there's certain similarities there. Dungeons, Dice, and Danger has more there's 4 different maps, but they also have like different difficulties and don't sound quite like once you play the harder ones, there's like not much incentive to go back to the easier ones. Then you have all these sheets of paper that are kind of not useless, but I like the aspect of the abilities and stuff sounds more interesting in here.
Yeah.
And the bosses is different. In Dungeons, Dice, and Danger, you can go fight a boss, and then once you defeat it, the other players have to like cross it off of their sheet. Like the boss has been defeated, they're not in. So it's kind of like you're in the same dungeon in a way. So there's differences between them, and I'd be interested to try this to see which one I like more now.
Yeah, there is some of that, like where there's like gems on the map, which also is just another spot where you score points. And like if you get to a gem first before another person does, then everyone crosses off that gem and is no longer accessible for them. And gems go away eventually after bosses in the single player mode as well.
Okay.
But this was good. Like I think like where I would say this is probably targeted towards would be a younger like 10-year-old, 8-year-old who's interested in like, you know, a little bit of fantasy, like to play this with them. I think they would really enjoy this. It's not
just missed you by a few years then.
that's right. Yeah. It's not super complicated by any means. It's not something that you'll have to like really, again, refresh on the rules.
Right.
That you like, it's very quick playing. You can play it. You can bang out a couple of these games. It's really easy to see what moves you made and if you made any mistakes. Actually, we'll say about the top part of the tracker, and which also works as the time tracker too, which I think they did really well. It's good. Like it's interesting. I just wish that I almost wanted more variability, and like maybe if there was like not a legacy version, but like, you know, like it gave me access to different powers, or because like all the bosses are basically the same. It's just like, well, this class deals double damage, like the soldier deals double damage, and oh, here's the Hydra, and the wizard deals damage to the Hydra. It's like, okay, like this is basically the same. It's
That's a shame.
Like,
it sounds like they could have done more with the bosses and could have done more with the campaign. It's like they almost teased like, hey, we have this thing, but it didn't quite live up in that.
Yeah. I wish there was just a slight bit more to it, but it is fun. Like I did enjoy, like it was satisfying coloring in and doing all that stuff too. So
and the dice, right?
The dice, the dice. The dice are the best. Play it just for the dice.
Cool.
But yeah, that's Paper Dungeons for me. I think it was interesting. It's nice, short playing. You get it to the table pretty easy. Good for a younger crowd.
Nice. These are all actually fairly quick games. I think all these you can play in an hour or less.
Yeah, I think Final Girl might be a bit longer.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
On the longer side, because you're literally just sitting there going, ah.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the time, but
cool. Well, let's get these back on here and do a quick So I guess this wasn't Own It, Play It, or Skip It. This was Play It, Play It, or Play It.
Play It, Play It, or Play It.
These are all Play It's. But I will say I did enjoy Guild of Merchant Explorers more than Caper Europe. And
I would probably put Final Girl ahead of Paper Dungeons, just because of the depth. Like there's way more variance when it comes to this.
Right.
This, like, I feel like I've seen everything this game has to offer. This game, I have like there are things in here I haven't seen.
Yeah,
so,
that's
like,
fair.
There's a lot to, I think, still to kind of unpack too. So
cool.
Yeah. That's it for us. What did you guys think? Were our opinions terrible, or were they spot on? Have you played any of these games? Are you interested in any of them? Let us know down in the comments below. Join the Discord. We're also, of course, on Patreon, of course. Looking forward to see what you guys think about these games. Caper Europe, Guild of Merchants Explorers, Final Girl Season 2, and Paper Dungeons. That's it for this video. I'm Braden. He's Carlo. We'll see you next time.